All right.
Good morning. No, afternoon. I realize I'm kind of standing in the way of lunch, so I'll be brief. I'm an associate professor at Indiana University, and I was asked by Gary to present and also help organize. So nice to be here. And I was going to provide an overview of trustworthy digital repositories.
Go ahead.
Okay, so researchers care about innovation, and in the 21st century, much of this innovation is driven by data. Increased access to data has transformed fields like astronomy, neutron science, proteomics, and disease prevention, especially responses to COVID-19. Increased access to that has transformed these fields. And similar changes in cultural heritage sector have resulted in unprecedented insights about human activity in the past. For example, genealogists can now routinely obtain birth, death, and marriage records online. Similarly, digitized land records can be used to settle claims and property disputes, ensuring the proper transfer of generational wealth and the restoration of rightful ownership. The common thread that connects these uses is the need for digital repositories, information systems that ingest, store, manage, preserve, and provide access to digital content. Digital repositories provide a very important home for data, including services for their users, grounding the foundation upon which scientific innovation and collective memory rests. However, not all digital repositories are able to rise to the challenge of digital preservation, that is, ensuring access to digital content over time, because it requires an ongoing technical, legal, financial, and organizational commitment. And here's why I was asked to be here. Trusted or trustworthy digital repositories are a subset of digital repositories that are thought to be able to handle the challenge of long-term digital preservation. A trustworthy digital repository, or TDR, is one whose mission is to provide reliable, long-term access to managed digital resources to its designated community of users now and in the future. And there's a certain amount of guesswork that's involved when we are planning for 10 years ahead, really, in this digital age, a couple months ahead, but 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, or however long it's useful for however long we intend or anticipate the data may be useful. So the initial push for audit and certification of TDR stemmed from concern about the fact that some important information in digital form that represents our cultural record had been lost forever. And examples of these include, but are not limited to, data from the 1960 census. We can't get that anymore. The first email and satellite observations of Brazil in the 1970s. Often technological obsolescence is the culprit in creating said data loss. The hardware and software that store and render the data become obsolete as newer, and in most cases better, hardware and software supersede them and the former cease to be produced. In 1996, Garrett and Waters first argued for audit and certification of TDRs to produce a network of repositories and identify institutions that could actually be trusted with the responsibility of preserving important digital information for the long term. Since the Waters and Garrett report was published, multiple standards for TDRs have been developed worldwide, including but not limited to trustworthy repositories, audit and certification criteria and checklists, better known as TRAC, and its subsequent audit and certification of trustworthy digital repositories, which is now an ISO standard, ISO 16363. And TDR standards from Germany include the catalog for criteria for trusted digital repositories that was created by the Nestor Working Group and the Nestor Seal of Approval, and their subsequent, the International Standard for Criteria and Trustworthy Digital Archives, which is DIN 31644. Beyond the German TDR standards, other TDR standards include the requirements for the International Council for Science, or ICSU, World Data System, regular members, the data seal of approval, and their subsequent. So they kind of merged and now have what we call the core trustworthy data repositories requirements and its accompanying core trust seal, or also can be called CTS. And even though all of these standards have their differences, and for example, pertaining to specific geopolitical and government contexts, they all include criteria emphasizing administrative responsibility, organizational viability, financial sustainability, technological and procedural suitability, system security, and procedural accountability. And guidelines for all of these are codified in criteria within the standards I had mentioned. So to become a TDR, a third party, usually representatives of one or more of these TDR standards, audit your repository against criteria for each category listed in this slide. Examples of third parties include the Core Trust Seal Standards and Certification Board for CTS, the Primary Trustworthy Digital Repository Authorization Body, or PTAB, for ISO 16363, and the Nestor Certification Working Group for the Nestor Seal of Approval and DIN 31644. So what do TDR criteria entail? For example, all TDR standards include criteria about having a mission statement that reflects a commitment to the preservation of, long-term retention of, management of, and access to digital information. There's also commonly criteria pertaining to the security of repositories' data, products, services, and users. And for these and other types of criteria, repositories are expected to provide evidence in the form of documentation, reports, interviews with staff, demos of the systems and reporting, copies of their budgets and financial statements to prove that they are adhering to the criteria in these standards. Third parties review repositories' applications and in some cases even conduct site visits to ensure that the documentation provided in applications for becoming TDRs align with their practices. And so that's how you would become a TDR. And there are various examples of them worldwide. This kind of shows, at least for some of the, for the Core Trust Seal, some of the regions that these TDRs are located in. And there's very different kinds of repositories that have it. So there can be domain-specific data centers, archives and repositories, national data centers, archives and repositories, repositories based on data type. So survey, research data archive of Taiwan is an example, or qualitative data repository based out of Syracuse, and commercial entities that store and make data publicly available, like Mendeley data. I don't know how much this has been referenced so far, but it's important to note the trust principles for digital repositories. So whether they are certified by a particular body, the hope is that, I mean, hopefully they are certified as CTS or likewise, but the idea of repositories being transparent about what it has in it and the extent to which it's publicly accessible is important. The R, that the repositories are responsible for the authenticity and the integrity of the data, that it has a user focus, that users, their expectations and their needs are met. Sustainability, to sustain services and preserve data holdings for the long term, and technology to provide infrastructure and capabilities to support secure, persistent, and reliable services. These principles should sort of guide the structure of the repositories and the services that are provided. And so I just kind of wanted to point you to some work that I've done. I've really been concerned about what is the value of TDRs. And so, like I said, there was a data seal of approval, or DSA, and then that kind of graduated to the CTS. So I've been working on this for a while. I think that might be how Gary found me. But I have this article that just talks about the different benefits that one would hope you could acquire as a result of becoming a TDR. And then I think how he really found me was I dabbled in some of this taxonomy and ontology. I would kind of echo an earlier statement, like I am not an ontologist, but I tried to do it because what I was really concerned about was how to articulate the value that a repository can bring to society, and whether we could sort of codify the impacts and benefits, because if you can measure that or have a nomenclature to be able to have that discussion, then you can better justify the return on investment and can hopefully garner more resources, because we know sustainability is a big piece that you know, maybe a taxonomy could help. And so I'm trying to sort of codify these benefits that a repository could have, and then we could use that to categorize repositories, in particular trustworthy digital repositories that are making a benefit to society. Okay, and so that was a whirlwind overview, but I hope that helped with understanding a little bit more about the origins and development of trustworthy digital repositories. Thank you.
Hi, it's great talk. Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, one question I have is like we heard Chris early talk, right? Like it's COB, and then I see you have in the end you have a taxonomy. Maybe.
Oops. How do I do
yeah,
that?
maybe, yeah, this taxonomy. Yeah, somehow can be. I think yeah, there can be some collaboration maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, with our global country, like we are also having some like a high level like structure, something like it. Format as like you, but currently maybe the contents somehow overlapping but different, but definitely can be a good discussion.
Yeah, yeah. I would love to collaborate with someone that knows the operators, you know, knows how to dabble in this even better and try to merge this, because, you know, I was glad that, you know, this is an application area, you know, biomedical information. So I know there's a lot of different repositories in various different fields, but this is a really strong and critical application area. So that would be great to follow up with you all. And I have it on GitHub. If you go to that article. Yeah.
So we have 8 minutes till lunch. We still have some time for questions. I make a comment. The purpose for this harmonization workshop is to bring more people outside of biomedical field, so we will see how people use ontology so that we can address them. Because as my experience, I work with users who use ontology and they got really confused with multiple ontologies listing and terminology, all those things. So if we can come up with something that will really improve the usage of ontology. Yeah, Anna Maria?
I really like this. And I think that, as you say, we need to get different views, you know, and effort that has been done into the ontology world. And this is, for example, NIHS is trying to kind of look at the different resources and database for environmental, and we are trying to find a way to more structurally kind of define those. And I think this is really a nice way to look at, and really interesting trying to see how we can map to the ontology term that we have in the structure. So
Great. You know, and I kind of ran into some issues like a trustworthy digital repository is an impact, but it can have an impact. You know, so it's like there's but either way, you know, it was just kind of interesting to say, okay, you know, this doesn't necessarily have to be a problem. There's just a way, whether it does or not, it's still beneficial to try to categorize, what's going on and what the benefits can be, because I think that as repositories, similar to other types of resources, we're all kind of fighting for a piece of the pie. So if we can more strongly articulate that, this is the value that it brings, this is the impact that it has to society, this is the benefit to the users, this is the benefit to, health, this is the benefit to, just knowing more about particular things that are happening, that we're the better for it. Just saying, oh, they're good and we should support them. You have to do more than that to be able to keep the resources you have and get more.
I agree. This is goes in both directions. Even for the repository, it's good because they can improve themselves.
Yes.
If they see, which piece they're missing of this. So
Yes.
and go to get grab their piece of cake.
Thank you.
Nice job.